All right. Good morning, everybody. Today is Thursday, December 31st, 2015. And this is Before the First Cup of Jules here on UCY.TV. Happy Thursday, everybody. It is 34 degrees and overcast here in upstate New York, but there is no snow on the ground. Everything that was here kind of melted. But I did see this weekend. I don't know. I think I'll get off all right. But down on the southern tier and right along the coast of Lake Erie, and on the Syracuse side of Lake Ontario, Tug Hill Plateau, they probably are going to get a foot or more of snow, but that's not me. So it's all right. I'm good. We're going into December with no snow on the ground. So where do we leave off yesterday? We titled the show Google, NASA, DARPA, X-37, Medevac, drone fleets, and the Internet of Things. And yes, if you remember, we connected all of them together and talked about some of these new, the drone air traffic control that's coming, where they're going to be using satellite towers and all these different frequencies. And it'll be Google, NASA, Verizon, Amazon, and then 13 ancillary companies. I don't know if it's a total of 13 or 14. I've seen two numbers. Plus these guys, or it's all these guys together. But there's going to be a big gaggle of corporations and government entities that will be responsible for the control grid of delivery drones coming in the near future. And we found out that Google had filed a patent for delivery drones. We were asking the question, like, what on earth is Google going to be delivering to me? Well, Google has decided that they're going to create a fleet of medevac drones to be able to deliver an ambulance in an emergency at any point in time. Pretty interesting. Of course, remember, any of this technology is always about making you safe. That's how they sell this stuff. But in the meantime, Google's got their super secret redacted FCC application in there because they're also launching their Project Loon in the United States, the one that was slated for Africa, that, whoops, we've changed our mind now, for some mysterious reason to be launched as of tomorrow in a 2-year testing phase over the United States. Well, then we found out that Google is one of the leaders with NASA and Verizon and Amazon working on this whole drone mapping, keep wanting to call it the FAA. It's the FAA for drones, but I don't remember what they were going to call it. But anyway, keep an eye on that. And then, of course, we ended with, and we will keep an eye on that, just not today. Today is going to be a rough one. So today we're just going to stick to like some stuff that is all happy little small enclosed components that we can chew on and then spit out when we're done at the end of the show. But we'll keep an eye on that Google, Amazon, NASA, Verizon conglomerate, because I think there's a lot more going on there than what is being said, but needs more research. All right. There was one other story we did yesterday. The Internet of Things is everywhere, but it doesn't rule yet, and they pretty much outlaid it. 2015 was the year that everyone started thinking about the Internet of Things, that everyone started coming out with the first devices. Now, they don't all work together yet. No interoperability. There's no NIST standards anywhere. This is like the Wild West of the old days of computers, where you couldn't buy a modem or a hard drive from one manufacturer and slap it into another. I mean, you could, but there was a lot of dancing and jumping through hoops to make things work. And sometimes it just didn't work. But in 2016, they're threatening us. Threatening! Here it comes. You're gonna have enchanted underwear. So, pay attention to that. But hey, we got all this data that we're collecting now from this Internet of Things. So a few of the problems are, how are they going to store all that data, and how are they going to find intelligence from that data? You know, they can collect terabytes, gigabytes, petabytes, but if they're is no way to pull intelligence out of the data, then it's pretty useless until the day when the supercomputer can engulf it and compute it all. But check this out. This is December 26th, so a few days ago. Researchers have figured out how to store the entire internet in a test tube. Now, I've talked about this stuff before, this DNA storage. They've been working on this for a long time. I don't remember which university it was. It was Harvard or MIT. One of them had encoded an entire library of text onto DNA before. And it was written tiny, 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 tiny writing. And that was a big deal when that happened because they were like, wow, look at this. And it almost lives forever. Well, then they came out and they said, with these, I don't remember actually what the term was. It was some sort of biological name. But with this DNA storage, they had already estimated that you could take every action, every interaction, every butterfly wing flapping. I've talked about this before. That's ever happened here on planet Earth. Anything in recorded time in history that's been said or done or whatever, and put that into like a pound of DNA. Which is pretty insane because it would be like the whole history of everything that ever happened to every little living creature or organism on planet Earth in like a pound of DNA. Well, now they've figured out a way to store the entire internet in a test tube. Oh, that NSA data center must be pretty scary. Engineer Robert Grass says that though we believe information is here forever, it's actually very fragile. Well, they're predicting that now with this new storage, we're going to be able to change that. Hard drives and physical sources of information like books decay over time. But in a video for the BBC, Grass describes his quest to find a method of preserving information that could be stable for millions of years. And that is the secret of DNA. And I'm not really understanding why this is new news, but maybe because back when this first came out as news a few years ago, no one really got it. No one really understood DNA yet. I was fascinated by it in biology in junior high school, so I've always kind of been into this stuff. But back a few years ago, nobody got it. They didn't know what CATG was. They didn't know why it was a big deal either. We didn't have gene editing with CRISPR-Cas9 or anything like we do now. But anyway, all right, let's go back here. In 2012, research showed, so I knew it was a few years ago, research showed that you could translate a megabyte of information into DNA and then read it back out again. DNA is a language of its own. It's written in the sequences of nucleotides. They say ACTG. I learned it as CATG. And think of it as similar to binary, which breaks down information into ones and zeros. And I've talked about this before. That's why when we use DNA for computing, it is just so much more powerful and expansive than anything we've done up until this point, because we only had either an on state or an off state, a 0 or a 1, to be able to do combinations and permutations. There's so many things you can do. But when you add 4 items to the mix, so now a C, an A, a T, and a G, or a 1, 2, 3, or 4, or a 0, 1, 2, 3, let's say. Now you've just exponentially increased the parallel computing and all the levels of things that you can do. You know, this is also when we were talking about some of the new proteins that scientists have discovered, the synthetic proteins. I think it was an X. I'm trying to remember. It was the alien DNA they called it. They were X and Y proteins that they added to the cell to create alien DNA. And they were touting how many more organisms could be developed because they have 2 extra proteins. It's the same situation. Now in the DNA, instead of having just 4 proteins to permutate and come up with different combinations of CATG, they now have CATG X and Y. And they were like, oh, we're going to be able to make all new kinds of drugs, and out of the side of their mouth creatures with this synthetic addition to the DNA strand. Anyway, back to the story. And the DNA has an advantage of being able to put an enormous amount of information into a tiny space. Theoretically, 1 gram of DNA could hold 455 exabytes. Yeah, that's huge. That's way beyond terabytes, gigabytes, terabytes. I don't know if exa is next or peta, but that's a pretty mega amount of information. 455 exabytes of info, which is enough for all the data held by Google, Facebook, and every other major tech company with room to spare, according to New Scientist. So that's in 1 gram of DNA. It pretty much holds everything all the big tech companies have. But the issue with previous DNA studies is that they haven't looked at the stability of information over time, which is a crucial factor. And you know what? I'm going to have to argue with that because way back when I first read the story, they had said it was 1 million year storage for DNA, which is why I started having visions of Jabba the Hutt. I couldn't do a good Jabba impression. That was supposed to be him. Oh. But now, Grass and his researcher partner, Richard Henkel, both of ETH Zurich in Switzerland, have come up with a method for not only potentially fitting all of Facebook or Wikipedia into a small test tube, but to also preserve it forever. Grass got his inspiration from ancient fossils in which the DNA of preserved animals is extremely stable. DNA decays by reacting with water and oxygen, but by packing the synthesized DNA in stable glass, Grass can prevent the degradation. But no preservation method is perfect, which is where Henkel comes in. Henkel came up with the idea of adding redundancies into the DNA. So if you lose part of the information, you can recover it. Holy crap! Just like data storage, if you've ever done any type of large amount of data archiving or live, real-time, accessible information, you know that it's not just one hard drive sitting there. That would be a really dumb thing, especially if there's lots of data that lots of people were accessing. You want to build some sort of redundancy as well as potentially some sort of way to either mirror or make it faster for people to access the data. But typically in redundancy, let's say this would probably be one of the most common ways would be called RAID, where you had, I don't know, thrown out there, 3 or 4 hard drives. You need 3 minimum to do really a real RAID. Not really, you could do mirroring between 2, but I always like to do the RAID, like RAID 5. You do minimum of 3 drives, maybe 4. You could have number 4 is a hot spare. And you could be taking your data and you physically would stripe that data in 3 pieces across all three of those drives. So you'd have part A, part B, and part C. Bink, 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 bink. Everything that's written in those hard drives are written across all three drives as if the drives were one. And what's the benefit to that situation? The benefit to that situation is that if I lose any of those hard drives, the computer is smart enough to say, hey, you know what? A minus X, the missing information on the missing drive, equals C. Hey, that's basic algebra. And we can figure out what's missing. They can do that. And then the beautiful part is if you have a blank number 4 drive sitting there just spinning in the hard drive bays, you can even set it up so if your one hard drive dies, it starts doing a hot rebuild while you're sleeping by figuring out what's missing using what's called parity and parity bits by striping across the drives, and it can rebuild everything. So it sounds like they're talking about doing something similar to that with the DNA. Now, sure, the DNA redundancy is probably a hell of a lot scarier than what I just illustrated for RAID 5. I loved RAID 5. RAID arrays were probably some of my fortes. Doing fiber channel and really high speed data transfer storage. I don't know. I really like that stuff a lot. But this stuff really kind of creeps me out. So anyway, they exposed their capsules to a test that mimics 500,000 years to up to 1 million years of cold storage. And they all held up. The next question, Grass tells the BBC, is what should we store? Oh, well, how about, I'm sure that the NSA probably is all over this. Let's see, I'm going to go look here because there's a whole BBC story here. And I don't know if we want to read this whole story, but he has a whole video thing here too. I really would like to know, this doesn't tell me anything more than we didn't already. It actually is locking up my machine. Come on! Oh, I have to tell you, whatever has broken with Chrome, I wish Chrome would choke on it and die, along with Google. All right, so there's music playing. Hold on. Turn it off. All right. So I don't know. Keep an eye on that. This is endless millionaire. Might as well be million-year data storage forever. Every major bit of data on the internet can all be put into a little tiny test tube and then saved in glass for 1 million years. Your data's never going to be private. Some creepy guy 1 million years from now is going to be able to look at your selfies. Get it? It's very horrifying. Anything you do is going to be saved and used against you or your progeny someday. All right. So we're going to continue on a little bit and stay on this DNA thing, because I have some new Mad Science Gone Mad stories that are queued up here. But this one caught my attention the other day, and we've talked about this many times in different ways. We've looked at the fungi in the forest. Happens to be the largest communication system in the human and animal kingdom are the fungi on the floor of the forest. We've talked many times before, the pollution and all this horrifying garbage that they're doing, the mad science and letting the genies out of the bottle everywhere and thinking it's not going to harm anything is very wrong. We've discovered down to the microbiota, the fungi, the bacteria, that they are all a crucial, important part to the web of life, whether it be in your intestines or in the intestines of the forest or in the intestines of the animal for that matter, or in the soil and all the beneficial bacteria that's been killed by the glyphosate, allowing these invasive organisms to come in and take over where all the good stuff was killed off by us and our mad science. Well, this is out of sot.net. It was originally on a greenmed.info. That's Sarah G who runs the thing. GreenMed. His stories are great. The interconnected web of life. Research reveals, now we found there's a whole bunch of stuff that research has revealed. Research has revealed that water potentially is a memory. If you have not looked into that, I highly recommend finding some research on YouTube on that. There have been quite a number of experiments done showing water memory and how you can program water. And considering that the majority of life on Earth is made up of water, it's kind of significant. Definitely took me aback when I saw that. They have also shown that plants have sentience. Plants can react to emotions. Plants react to many things, I believe, in our environment. Makes me wonder if plants scream. Because that's kind of a horrifying thought. I don't want to be hurting anything. I don't like to hurt things. You know, they used to tell us when we were kids that animals didn't have feelings. Do you remember that? Animals don't have emotions. Don't worry about it. Animals don't have feelings. And any of us who had pets absolutely knew animals did have feelings. Animals can be happy and sad. They can be your little buddy and they can communicate with you. Oh no, animals don't talk. Animals don't have a language. Well, of course they do. It's not necessarily the same as ours, but they can understand words of ours. But you know, if you just learn to listen and to pay attention, everything has a language. Everything is a way of communicating. You just need to know how to hear it. The interconnected web of life, research reveals that plants can think, choose, and remember. This is a new one for me. Like I said, this is just like animals don't think. Animals don't have emotions. You know, plants, they used to tell us that plants, you know, what do plants matter? Plants don't feel anything or see anything. And you know what, plants, let's just cut down all the trees because that doesn't matter either. And it's just very disturbing at how they've told us these things. And who knows if they truly believe them, but they've told us these things over generations as they've completely devastated our environment. So nobody seemed to care much except for the crunchy greenies. And then everyone pointed at them and laughed and said that they were militants. But, you know, what's becoming more and more apparent to me is that the globe is a big living organism. And I don't think there's any doubt in anyone's mind in that now. People used to laugh when you'd say that in the 70s, but it's very true. And we are just a small red corpuscle, or I'd say a cancer cell by this point, on this big organism we call Earth. And poor Earth is having some major issues right now. They're about to get more major. Anyway, research reveals that plants can think, choose, and remember. I'd like to be talking to the plants to see what they had to say. Plants are far more intelligent and capable than we give them credit for. And in fact, provocative research from 2010 published in the Plant Signaling and Behavior, which is a publication, proposes that since they cannot escape environmental stresses in the manner of animals, plants have developed a, quote, sophisticated, highly responsive, and dynamic physiology, which includes information processes such as biological quantum computing and cellular light memory, which could be described as forms of plant intelligence. And remember, we talked about biophotons as well at one point, And then actually, they talk about biophotons in science publications. So that isn't like it's, you know, crunchy kumbaya science or anything. There's some sort of like energy light particles that exist within plants. And that's actually something, maybe for 2016, that's one of the things on my list I really want to dig into is biophotons. And the other one we're going to really dig into is going to start looking at these frequencies and some of this garbage that they're doing. Anyway, the book titled, or actually a study titled Secret Life of Plants from Memory to Intelligence, the study highlights one particular superpower of plants indicative of their successes as intelligent beings. It says there are living trees that germinated long before Christ was born, and what sort of life wisdom evolved in a plant to make it possible to survive and propagate for so long a time in the same place that they germinated. And that's very true. I mean, look at the sequoias, thousands and thousands of years old, sitting in the same place that it was, standing watch. I just saw something very disturbing that I think I posted on UCY's Facebook the other day, that there are some big problems with the trees in California now. And even here we have that beetle borer, boxwood beetle something, one of those boar beetles that's been going in and killing, I don't remember which one it is this time. We've had a few up here. All the birch died at one point. This might be oak, or I don't know. Don't quote me on that. We have some boar beetle, and they put a big moratorium on harvesting wood, like in one area. Like you couldn't go get wood down in the southern tier and then bring it up toward the northern New York because the beetle hadn't spread yet. So they were preventing people from doing that. But with all this freaky weather, and once the trees have trauma, and like in California, they've had lots of trauma with the drought. Now we have these invasive organisms coming in and taking advantage, and that really worries me, because once you start getting infestations and these trees start getting like gutted from the inside out, it's going to be a big issue. We need trees. We can't lose any more trees. Should be planting bazillions of trees in the Amazon right now. As they keep trying to blame carbon dioxide and global warming. It has nothing to do with any of the methane mass expulsions going on in the northern nether regions under the ocean, or that huge methane leak. Did you see in California? There's this massive methane leak, 70,000. Did I see yesterday 70,000 gallons released a day of methane? Methane is one of the superheating greenhouse gases, and we can't breathe the stuff. So the fact that this shit is pouring into our atmosphere should be way more concerning than the fact that we have an abundance of CO2 in the atmosphere that, is the air that plants breathe. Not like it's poison. It might cause warming, but plant a whole shitload of trees. It just makes no sense to me. We should just be reforesting every place that's been mega deforested. According to the researchers, plants actually work as a biological quantum computing device. And I know this sounds pretty crazy, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and we'll read this. That is capable to process quantum information encrypted in light intensity and its energy. And now, look, we're just getting close to being able to take our first baby steps in quantum computing. And quantum computing is using light to send information. Just because we haven't quite gotten there yet doesn't mean that other organisms haven't already been that advanced. And I think there's way more that we don't know, by the way. Like I said, talking about frequencies and flashes of light and magnetism. I mean, do a little bit of digging into DARPA's Elect RX program. We've already touched on that a little bit, and that's some of this newfangled mad science research that they're doing with the brain and the vagus nerve and the microbiota of the gut, and using magnetics and frequencies to try to heal without medications or invasive surgeries. And I know it sounds very Star Trek, but there are all of these natural laws that are out there, things that we've never touched on before. And instead of being barbaric, cutting and smashing, we should be looking at other ways that other things work as a lesson. I mean, this is pretty unbelievable. So anyway, we're talking about quantum computing inside of a plant using light. According to researchers, plants actually work as a biological quantum computing device that is capable of processing quantum information encrypted in light intensity and its energy. This information processing includes a mechanism for processing memorized information. For example, plants can store and use information from the spectral composition of light for several days or more to anticipate changes that might appear in the near future in the environment, such as the anticipation of a pathogen attack. According to the study, plants can actually think and remember, but moreover, not only possess a mechanism for information gathering and processing, but also appear to exercise agency or choice vis-a-vis different scenarios. It says different groups of chloroplasts and cells in the same leaf under identical, constant, and stable light, temperature, and relative humidity conditions have different opinions as to quote-unquote what to do in such conditions, and tests different scenarios of possible future development. So they're actually saying is that the plant does what a lot of us do. Like, as you're looking at a situation, I've talked about me looking down timelines. I do that all the time. As we get closer and closer to an event, it becomes more and more apparent as to probably what's going to happen. But if you back up like 5 years or a year even, and you look at the spread of the land of all the things that are happening, you can see probably 20, 30 different timelines. Maybe not that many, but if you use your imagination, you can. But you can see all the possible outcomes based upon the input you have right now. And as you get closer and closer to the event, many of those possibilities go away as history and the future have played out. It becomes more and more apparent as to what the end result is going to be. Well, apparently plants can do that too. The study also offers an explanation as to why plants absorb more light energy than is needed for photosynthesis alone. Another possible answer to the above question is that a light training of young leaves. Let's imagine if a young leaf or flower is emerging out of a plant. It would be nice for that leaf or flower to know about the conditions in which it is going to emerge. Older, more experienced leaves that actually are acclimated to the outside conditions can train naive, emerging young leaves with the PEPs, which stands for photoelectrophysiological signaling, and their cellular light memory mechanisms. This explains why plants possess a natural capacity to absorb more light energy than is required for photosynthetic CO2 assimilation. They need this absorbed energy and access for optimization and training of light, inflammatory, and immune defenses. The author leaves us with a provocative conclusion in this paper. Says our results suggest that plants are intelligent organisms capable of performing a sort of thinking processes understood at the same time in non-stress conditions, capable of performing several different scenarios of possible future definitive responses, and capable of memorizing this training. Indeed, leaves in the dark are not are able to not only quote unquote see the light, but are also able to differently remember its spectral composition and then use this memorized information to increase their Darwinian fitness. Dun, dun, dun. And I mean, this goes on and on. I don't know if I really want to get into well, says to the contrary, if we open ourselves up to the possibility that we are all participants in an interconnected web of life, as the many of the indigenous people believed and actually experienced things to be, destroying the natural world simply to serve the essentially suicidal infinite economic growth model will be identified for the insanity that it is. And I've been saying that forever. I've always been a greenie. I've always been able to talk to animals too, and don't laugh because I can. Actually, it's more like animals talk to me. They just, and even my kid sees that. I mean, animals just like me. I can't help it. I go into a room and I'm always the one that like the cat or the dog sitting next to, Animals just like me. And if I sit there and I look at them, we can have a conversation. They tell me things. And I don't know, it's just because I love animals. But the thing that's interesting is that all organisms have a communication system. I mean, like I said, they've told us forever that animals can't communicate. I mean, they literally found that cockroaches have personalities. We did that story about a year ago. I was very surprised about that one. I was not expecting bugs to have personalities, but they do. I had a lizard about 20 years ago, dwarf tegu. Little Billy, he was the cutest little thing ever. He had a personality. He had quite the sense of humor. And we used to play hide and go seek, and he'd get all excited when we play. He'd get this little smile on his face. It was very cute. Every creature has a personality. And it seems that so do plants. Once her bacteria have personalities. I'm sure they'll find out they do at some point. Anyway, so yes, the insanity of killing the planet is killing ourselves. It's like being a cutter. Get out your razor blade and start cutting death metal into your arm. Because that's what we're doing to the planet. Back to the story. If we recognize, as biologist James Lovelock proposed, that the Earth as a whole should be looked upon more like a self-regulating organism, which is the Gaia hypothesis, or as mycologist Paul Stamets envisions that there is a fungi-based internet within the ground. Remember, we talked about that one, connecting all living things on the planet in an information sharing network, and they've proven that. This is the biggest network that exists, is the fungi network on the floor of the forest. We will be less likely to both perceive and to treat the natural world as another organism to be dominated. And bravo. I think if there's something to leave us with for 2015, it's stop destroying other life forms. We do not need to be a cancer. We are a cancer in this organism we call life. All right. Talking about being a cancer, let's pop over to plagues. I think we need to talk about plagues. And genetic modification. So, we have either killed or bastardized many different kinds of life on planet Earth. And back in I don't know when it was. Hold on, let's see if we can find it. I don't know if it was 2014, 2013, 2010 maybe. But they've been messing around with mosquitoes at Oxitec. We talked about them many times when they were kind of in the news. Genetically modified mosquitoes using the CRISPR Cas9 gene drive, and we can wipe out entire populations of living creatures and replace them with the Frankenstein creature we created in the lab. Well, not a problem. those pesky mosquitoes, those Aegypti, whatever they were called, are just loaded with diseases, right? Bill Gates put a lot of money behind it. Malaria, dengue, chickamauga, tzatziki, all this other stuff. They just kill people all over. And so we need to wipe them out. Well, we have these mosquitoes now in Florida that are like the size of pterodactyls, right? We talked about that, stabbing through your clothes, attacking fish and dogs. But don't worry, because they just blew it off of a hurricane, and they ate all the eggs of the originals and killed them all. And they don't have any diseases anymore, but we don't know where they came from. But hey, even though the people of Florida wouldn't allow us to release the genetically modified mosquitoes, we did release them in the Cayman Islands and other places like Brazil. Let's read about Brazil. Now, this story was from July of 2015, but we've been reading about this for a while, and they've been letting these genetically modified mosquitoes out in different countries over the last few years. This is genetically modified male mosquitoes who sire offspring that die early have finally been released in Brazil to suppress dengue. Now, interesting, offspring that die early. That was part of that CRISPR-Cas9. We dug way deep into that as to how that worked and as to how Oxitec was getting that to happen. And they did something where they messed with the proteins in the DNA. So when the fledgling, growing, young mosquito was growing, it wouldn't have the proper nutrients to be existing and withered up and died. This is according to the results published in the PLOS, Neglected Tropical Diseases, this week, and this is a medical publication. These quote-unquote sterile skeeters, sterile as in any offspring they have die as babies, have reduced the dengue mosquito population in one Brazilian suburb by a whole 95%. Dengue, also known as bone breaker, infects as many as 390 million people a year. It is second most significant mosquito-borne disease after malaria, but unlike malaria, dengue has been increasing in both incidence and severity, and there are no specific drugs or licensed vaccines to treat this infectious disease, at least not yet. Now remember, this was July of 2015. His primary vector is the Aedes aegypti, like I said, and researchers around the world have been developing a so-called self-limiting gene. It's when a transgenic male mates with a wild female and the transgene is passed to the embryo, leading to a larva death before they are old enough to start transmitting diseases. Last year in 2014, a self-limiting strain called OX513A reached the field evaluation stage after extensive lab tests and releases of OX513A males in the Cayman Islands, ding ding, in 2010 have led to 80% suppression of the target population, while isolated field demonstrations in Brazil have achieved similar successful results after 6 months. Then in the beginning of 2011, a team led by Andrew McCormy of Oxitec conducted a sustained series of OX513A field releases, and this is a new country. I don't even know where this is. Oh, it's again Brazil. Itabira, a suburb of Juazeiro in the semi-arid region of northeastern Brazil. So again, more Oxitec mosquitoes in Brazil. Throughout the study, local mosquito control was deployed as normal, but public health agents continued to destroy breeding sites and treat the homes with larvicide, blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to kind of set the base here for this next story that we're going to look at. So we have genetically modified mosquitoes by Oxitec released in Brazil in at least July of 2015, the Cayman Islands in 2010. Who knows what other countries are where, but people were getting pissed off. But I see the story now. Guys, you're not even going to believe this, because I couldn't I was like, what? Connect the dots. Story December 24th, 2015. Warning, me. Don't get pregnant. Brazilians urged as 2,700 offspring are born with brain damage linked to a mosquito virus. Well, there's now been an outbreak in Brazil of a virus that doctors believe caused microencephaly in newborns. And it has forced Brazilian health officials to appeal to withhold people from getting pregnant. The Zika virus is believed to have already caused over 2,700 cases of birth defects. Putting off pregnancy has become a necessity in Brazil, particularly in the where? Oh, the Northeast. Isn't that what they just said? They released all these mad science oxitec freaking mosquitoes? Because I'm pretty sure that's what we just read. Yes, particularly in the Northeast, where a dangerous virus transmitted by the Aedes aegypti mosquito dwelling in tropical climates caused microencephaly, according to doctors. And this is an otherwise rare condition which causes dramatically shrunken skulls in newborns. It's very rare. But with over 900 cases reported, Pernambuco state has become the most affected territory, and after the number of reported cases nationwide sharply increased from only 147 cases in 2014. But wait, then we released the genetically modified mosquitoes in 2015, and in 2015 they've had over 2,400 cases of this very rare disease in newborns. They were born to mothers bitten by these mosquitoes. But now there have been so many cases that 6 Brazilian states have now declared a state of emergency. The presence of Zika virus in a newborn was established on November 28th during an autopsy of a baby being born with microencephaly. And the problem is worsened by the fact that initial ultrasounds of a fetus could be normal, and the microencephaly is determined toward the end of the pregnancy. This is an unprecedented situation, unprecedented in the world of scientific research, says the Brazilian Health Ministry on its website. Ding, da, da, ding, ding, ding. Now, if this isn't an example of us being a cancer on the planet Earth, and messing with things that we shouldn't be messing with. And now we're doing real-time live experiments on fetuses and infants in Brazil with genetically modified mosquitoes. This is not a coincidence, people. When I saw this, I almost literally vomited. These are evil, evil corporations. But you know what? Well, here, let's read a little bit more, because then I have one more to add on to this. Initially, the Zika virus case were registered in only northeastern Brazil, but more cases of microencephaly have since been detected in regions to the south, in Rio de Janeiro and Sao Paulo, and today, Zika virus cases have been registered in 20 out of the nation's 27 states. These are newborns who will require special attention for their entire lives. It is an emotional stress test that just cannot be imagined, says Angela Rocha, pediatric infection expert at Oswald Cruz Hospital. Here in Pernambuco, we're talking about an entire generation of babies that are going to be affected. It is a very personal decision, but at this moment of uncertainty, if families can put off their pregnancy plans, that is what we are recommending. So talk about eugenics at its best. Using little flying poison machines, and you know that they're going to do this stuff. You know, we kind of joked about that before, about getting bitten by like some robo mosquito drone or some GMO freaking mad science project. And they had even been postulating that it was possible that the DNA or some of the RNA could pass from the spit of the female mosquito that was biting you into the bloodstream of humans. But don't worry about that because it probably won't happen, right? No! We'll tell that to the 2,700 cases of birth defects in this 1 year in Brazil after they released the genetically modified mosquitoes. That cannot be a coincidence. I don't have any proof of that, but you tell me that those two dots do not connect with like a big fat black Sharpie line. Sure looks like it to me. And hey, but wait, it gets even better. Yesterday, the very first dengue fever vaccine gets the green light in 3 whole countries. Now, didn't they just say in July we didn't even have a vaccine or treatment for dengue? Well, 6 months later, we have one now, and guess where? Where did they get the green light? Oh, Brazil. Poor Brazil. When the female Aedes aegypti mosquito sups on the blood of its human victims, it too often deposits the virus that causes dengue, causing as many as 400 million infections a year worldwide. Severe forms of the painful flu-like disease can be fatal, especially among children, and until recently, there has truly been no effective prevention except avoiding getting bitten. But the outlook is looking better. During just this past month, Dengivaxia, developed by a French pharmaceutical company called Sanofi, has now been approved for use in 3 countries. 1 is Mexico. 2 is the Philippines, who approved the vaccine earlier this month. And just this week, and the company also announced that the drug has received the green light in Brazil, which has seen more than 1.4 million cases of the disease in 2015. Wow, what an amazing number of cases of dengue, especially for releasing genetically modified mosquitoes that were supposed to get rid of all the dengue. 1.4 million cases. Exactly when the inoculations will be deployed and at what price remains unclear as the terms of the vaccine, listen to this, as the terms of the vaccine are being negotiated between the countries and the company. So I guess companies have full negotiations with countries. That's messed up. Well, I think it's getting near the end of the show already, which is pretty insane. And I think we're going to leave some of the stuff maybe for tomorrow. We got something going on about a new pandemic in pigs passing to humans, fungus in the brain, contagious forms of cancer. There's more of them now. And I really think it's all damage that we've done and some mad science genies we've let go that's causing all this insanity. But I guess because it's New Year's Eve, this is the story we're going to end it up with. It is the best of 2015, titled, this is out of MIT Technology Review, Best of 2015, Spiders ingest nanotubes and then weave silk reinforced with carbon. So how great is that? So if they start putting it in our food, are we going to poop carbon too? And these are carbon nanotubules, mind you. Spiders, this really isn't funny because listen how horrifying this is, especially as our environment is more and more polluted with all these mad science genies. Spiders sprayed with water containing carbon nanotubes and graphene flakes have produced the toughest fibers ever measured, says material scientists. Spider silk is one of the more extraordinarily strong materials known to science, and the protein fiber spun by spiders to make webs is stronger than almost anything that humans can make. The dragline silk spider uses used to make a web outer rim and spokes are amazing stuff, and it matches high-grade alloy steel for tensile strength and is only about a sixth as dense. It is highly ductile and sometimes capable of stretching to up to 5 times its length. And this combination of strength and ductility makes spider silk extremely tough, matching the toughness of state-of-the-art carbon fibers such as Kevlar. So it goes without saying that the ability to make spider silk even stronger and tougher beyond anything that's been possible before is huge. That's why the work of Nicola Punghi at the University of Trento in Italy and a few pals has been something of a jaw-dropper. It is the strongest that has ever been measured. The team that used a neat trick to introduce the carbon nanotubules and graphene flakes into the spider silk was by using 15 spiders in the lab collected from the Italian countryside. And then they collected samples of the silk produced for reference. It has ended up making spider silk that is stronger and tougher than anything else that they have yet seen in the world. It says one possibility is that the silk becomes coated with these carbon-based materials after it is spun. They cannot rule out that it is because it has been restructured by the carbon nanotubes being introduced into the organism's body. So I don't know, guys. This really has some horrifying implications. You know, this nano crap is everywhere. They're spraying stuff in the atmosphere and in our food and doing experiments on living creatures that just aren't ethical. But they end up incorporating themselves into every level of our environment. So what do you think of that? Top story of 2015, people. Spiders ingest nanotubes and then weave reinforced silk with carbon, strongest fibers ever seen. All right, well, make sure you stick around because guess what? Happy New Year, everybody. Mr. Kevin Blanche is live up next. Yay! I got all my sound effects. It's Thursday night, so there's all kinds of radio. Chuck will be on tonight with Double Cross Radio and Hal and FM Gibson. All right, guys, everyone have an awesome night, and